As we settle into autumn, I can almost smell the pumpkin spice scented candles with the ever-looming spooky month right around the corner. And clearly YouTube read my mind, because I started discovering videos by a content creator that I now absolutely love. Christine McConnell. In her videos, she lovingly restores older homes, creating vintage spaces to die for. Did I mention her content has a really spooky twist? Well, although I cannot claim to live in a 19th century mansion, I do still enjoy transforming spaces into my version of vintage. To that end, I welcome you to a project that I took on not having oodles of space, multiple rooms, or a never-ending budget. Designing a vintage office. This was a corner of my bedroom not too long ago. A dead space. Sorry, I'll stop now. In it, we have my television. Yes, I have one. Actually, I have two, because clearly I cannot resist anything a little kitsch or nostalgic. My microphone for chats with my community, various bits and bobs, and behind those little red curtains, my games consoles. Because yes, self-confessed gamer here, although not really ever having the time to actually indulge in gaming. And I was just fed up with not having a proper space to bring my work to life and to spend hours of my life editing. And yeah, as you've probably already guessed, the 90s PC just won't cut it for that. Overall, this space was just a bit of an eyesore. And so, we're doing an overhaul. And here's the plan. So, I'm afraid that we're going to have to say goodbye to the Disney television, and that's going to have to live in my loft for the time being, as it just doesn't go with the aesthetic that I have in mind. Then we're going to lose some art and replace it with different, more bespoke art. The curtains are out, the old suitcase is out in favour of something that I'll show you in an upcoming video. And then I'm thinking of painting this hand-me-down Ikea unit a deep olive green and give it a kind of 1960s office vibe with vinyl wood effect on the top. Then I'm going to add a different chair here that I already own and is much better for the old posture, which I desperately need to address. And then use this screen to kind of partition this space so it feels separate from the rest of my bedroom. I'm going to cover all my little retro games on this red shelf with more of that red curtain, add a floating shelf with some plants and books and various other things, and those new pieces of artwork. Look, just trust the vision, okay? So the first thing Jack needed to do was remove the centre column from this unit for leg space. The unit having a slight lip on the bottom is actually really ideal for resting my feet and therefore improving lower back strain. And what I'm going to do is keep the middle part and repurpose it for something pretty cool later on. And there we have it. She is out. Hang in there, Gromit. Trust the process. Yes, I could have searched around on the World Wide Web for a vintage desk. But I really wanted to still keep my consoles accessible rather than in drawers, and I am trying to do this thing on a budget and in a way that doesn't turn my bedroom completely upside down, which, to be honest, kind of happened anyway. And so we're working with what we have. Let me show you a little mood board that I designed for this space, because I wanted to tie in a lot of my favourite vintage and nostalgic elements, but in a way that felt harmonised. And yes, I am aware it might sound a tad excessive to design an entire mood board for somewhere that isn't even its own room, but it's a big part of my room and a big part of my life. And you know me, there's always an excuse to make something a tad more whimsical.
I got a fever, and the only prescription is more whimsy.
Shout out to Miss Maxie. I absolutely loved your Ghibli office transformation, and a lot of that really did inspire me here. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a blend of vintage elements here. Mainly the 40s, 50s and 60s era, with the desk itself echoing old office spaces. And I have some reference images that I found for the desk that I thought would work with its boxy and straight line shape. Of course, we've got the typewriter, because I will be taking this opportunity to finally properly display my vintage typewriter again. And I also have some quiet hopes for my keyboard, but we'll come to that later. Then I'll be adding some other office-like vintage touches, like my Japanese retro desk clock from the 1950s and a classic office-style lamp. Now, for my monitor, which is basically just my television with a HDMI cable in the back, I'd love to encase it in an old frame so that it almost looks like a painting. And I also want to add some whimsical, almost Ghibli-inspired charm with lots of plants and potentially a critter. or two. The overall colour scheme is a sort of olive green and deep mahogany, and I also want to be creative with the lighting in this space and make it feel like a creative little den. We're going to be adding some bespoke artwork, as I said, and that quote is from Anne of Green Gables, if anyone is wondering. Finally, we have a perfect depiction of me when editing a video, and of course a coffee ring stain, because, well, you know. So then I needed to remove all of the stuff on top of the unit and my consoles and just address that dreaded wiring issue. Betty was of course on hand for supervision. And then boom! It's ready for a good old clean with some tried and tested sugar soap.
Let me get my sugar soap.
After a scrub-a-dub-dub, I now present to you my new series, Mythbusters. And our first question, can you really paint IKEA furniture? So it is not a myth, ladies and gentlemen. Apparently you can paint IKEA furniture, even the kind that has this sort of shiny laminate coating, but you have to follow some tips and advice first. So I've seen a few recommendations where people sand down the furniture piece first. I've seen others where they use a shellac, don't know if I'm saying that right, shellac based primer. And I've seen one video where they simply use chalk paint. And this video followed the easiest process to paint IKEA furniture, and so that's the one I'm following today. As you can see, I've got my lovely olive green chalk paint, and it's very important that it is chalk paint because, as it states on the tin, it'll paint everything. The video recommendation says that rather than one thick coat, you need two very, very thin coats. Now, I can go a bit heavy-handed when it comes to painting, so I'm going to try my best to do two extremely thin coats. And as I say, I'm going to paint all the sides, and then everything that's kind of a surface area, I'm going to put the vinyl wrap on. So let's just see how we go. And obviously I'm going to stir it a little bit first. In fact, I have nothing to stir it with. I didn't think about that. It is pretty small, which I'm a little bit nervous about, but I think, from what it says it can cover, I think we should be fine for this one unit. And like I say, we're going to be going very thinly, so there should be no problem. That coverage is actually not too bad. I thought it was going to look a lot patchier than that, but that's actually doing okay. And I'm just going really sparingly and trying to make it go as far as possible. And I do like the colour, thank goodness, so that's a bonus. I think going in really light just helps it kind of grip to the unit itself. So when you go in with your second coat, you've got a really good base to work with. So yes, it's entirely up to you. Sand it, prime it, or use paint everything chalk paint. But either way, this was going on just fine. And so here's me discovering how to use time-lapse on my phone for the very first time. I gave it 2 full coats and then a kind of touch-up coat on any sections that needed attention. And I was so happy with the colour. I felt that it was really warm and classic. Voila! She already looks like a new desk entirely. But restrain your joy, because this is where my patience was tested beyond belief. I have worked with vinyl before when I added faux stained glass to my front door, but this vinyl did take a lot of jiggery pokery to get right. And then after the largest part was smoothed over, which honestly couldn't have come soon enough, I added the same vinyl to each surface. Finally, our base was done, and so it was time to head to my local B&Q for all the things on my little list. And yes, even that deserved a bit of whimsy. Plus, I met a follower of mine. What are the chances? Day absolutely made. Now we're moving on to my favourite part, and the favourite part of anyone who feels the burning desire within them to constantly surround themselves with aesthetically pleasing, quirky items to quell their constantly simmering anxiety and inner turmoil. Look, I like things that I can look at that make me smile. So we're using this red PC mouse that I already had and turning it into a ladybug. Complicated as ever, we're simply using circular stickers that I'm colouring in with permanent marker for the black spots, and then 2 little blue stickers where I'm giving her a flirty little expression. Have I become attached almost instantly? Yes. Then for my mouse mat, I was originally going to make my own using a transparent desk mat and wrapping paper, but then I decided to make something much smaller as I wanted a round mat for Miss Ladybug to sit on nicely, but with a kind of cottagecore design. And I found this design on Etsy, which I really loved, and so I attempted to recreate it on some basic foam, and I used my old retro mouse mat to cut the shape. How satisfying is that circle? And then I had a couple of practices with the mushroom design. Now, I'm not really an illustrator, but I wanted to challenge my patience and see if I could actually draw something that I was happy with for once. Then came the crunch time. I started drawing the design onto the mat in biro, using permanent markers to give parts of it a bit more depth and shadow. You know what? I didn't hate it. So after a quick neaten of the edges of the mat, I think this will work perfectly. Oh, it was really starting to come together. So I went in with some accessories, an office lamp that we already had, this beautiful Japanese pigeon painting, which I've been waiting to display, and then came either the boring bit or the most satisfying bit, depending on who you are as a person, placing my consoles back into the shelves and carefully organising the wiring. I also wanted each shelf to feature a cute vintage ornament so that the consoles weren't quite as obvious. And although I was thrilled with my hard work, look at that yucky display, which, would you believe, is actually organised. Let's fix that. Ah, who doesn't love a mini curtain made out of a tea towel? You still with me? You still there? So now we're on to the grand finale, which was putting a frame around my television. And there are actually companies that will do this for you for a fee, of course, where they'll make bespoke frames to sort of help your television blend more into your surroundings. But you know me, why buy something when we could just make it ourselves? And when I say we, I mean my incredibly handy boyfriend who happens to own an electric saw. But first, I need to ask my mum a very important question. Could we sacrifice one of the landing paintings for this project? It was only a print and not something that we were deeply attached to, and so we whipped that off the wall, removed the glass and print, and I measured the monitor for this to become the frame that Jack built. Honestly, the thing that man does for me are my strange little ideas.
That wasn't sketchy.
Speaking of which, do you remember that centre column that we removed from the unit? Well, I had an idea to repurpose this to be a slide-out drawer for my keyboard and mouse, so that the top of the desk looked a lot less cluttered and it gave me a little bit more space. So we filled in the damage that had been done during extraction and then fitted some normal drawer sliders and then vinyled the top of the drawer, and I painted the sides in that same olive green. Jack had also suggested adding a little floating shelf for books and plants, and so we went ahead and popped that just above the monitor. And then I wanted to experiment with some old fairy lights that had been salvaged from my nan's conservatory and had been there for literally as long as I can remember. But the first attempt was not it. I mean, look at that, it's just a big no-no. I didn't want these to be on display necessarily, as much as I just wanted the warm glow. So I decided to pop in some screw-in hooks and then wrap the lights at the back of the desk. Okay, who's ready for the big reveal? Well. Listen, I cannot explain to you the sheer joyousness, joy, the sheer joy that this space gives me. I mean, I literally feel like I'm surrounded by all of my favourite things, which is so vital for the amount of time that I spend here, either working on scripts or bringing projects to life or doing research, all that good stuff. Bonus points to anybody who noticed my lovely typewriter-themed keyboard. Now, I'll be honest, I did do a little bit of a splurge. I splurged on this particular item and we'll do a price breakdown in a second, but it is so much more stimulating to use than a regular keyboard. And I really like how, her granddaddy is in the back there. So you've kind of got that contrast between new and old, but they both echo a similar design. And you can use the levers to change the lighting or the dials, change the volume. And it's just nice. And I really enjoy using it. Not only does it get daily use, but it does provide daily joy. I just love the way that, in my personal opinion, everything really came together. The green is echoed throughout in ornaments and the colour of the desk and paintings and plants. You've got a kind of cottagecore vibe with the mushroom and ladybird elements, but you've also got a bit of a Ghibli vibe, again with the plants and the snow globe and some of the ornaments that I've got there, but also a 1940s, 50s, 60s retro office vibe with the clock and the lamp and the typewriter. And it really is everything that I adore, kind of blended. That's not really a blending sort of gesture. Blended, shoved into one. And I happen to think that it works really, really well. And I found this gorgeous pigeon painting to really bring that frame to life, just by searching up famous paintings featuring pigeons and girls, pigeons and women. And I found this one and I really love it. It kind of spoke to me. And when I used it as my wallpaper, I was just like, yes. We've got the sand timer, we've got the doctor's bag, we've got my grandpa's old brownie camera. Even the bin has a vintage element to it. Everything just is so very much me. And even hidden in the plants is another weird favourite thing of mine, which is dinosaurs. I've always been really into dinosaurs, since I was small. I had a dinosaur-themed bedroom once. So I've even got little dinosaurs hidden within the plants. So this really is, it's a bit of me. On to the prices. The desk itself was, of course, free. The chalk paint was £12. I forgot to say, I also did a layer of wax paint to prevent the paint from chipping, and that was £5.50. The vinyl wrap was £8. The TV frame was free. The manual labour from my boyfriend, also free. But we did have to buy sliders for the drawers and they were £7.50. The filler for the drawer was lent to me from Jack and so free. The floating shelf was £15. The small rail for the mini curtain was £1. The tea towel, also £1. The curtain rings were £2. And all of the accessories and paintings and most of the plants I already owned. But I did buy the big one that's on my floating shelf because she was calling out my name. But I kind of wish I hadn't, as she was £16 and her plant part was a further £5. The PC mouse was free. The stickers that I put on the mouse were 79 pence. The foam for the mouse mat was 80 pence. And the big one, the keyboard, was £105. Look, I said I splurged. So if we exclude what I call the frills, so the big mama plant and her plant pot and also the keyboard, of course, we did this entire project for £53.59. With the plant and plant pot, it was £74.59. And of course, if you save up and go the whole hog like I did, then you need to add £105 onto that total for the keyboard, which is by no means a necessity because you could easily find keyboards a lot cheaper than that. Whichever way you look at it, we did this entire project for under £75. And excluding a couple of accessories, we did it for under £55. Not bad, eh? I likely would have broken that budget just by purchasing a new, or should I say, an old desk alone. And plus, it was really fun bringing the vision to life. And now I have a space where I can let my creative juices flow, whether that be in 1940s office glamour or as a little editing gremlin. Until next time.